Good morning. Dawn is coming. We're getting away from 5:30, which is early. There have been earlier mornings, but we might start to see it come up behind me, especially if I talk too long. And as you can hear, my voice is nearly lost. Whatever affliction was getting after me is nearly past, but it's left a bit of gravel in my words. But there is no reason, that is no reason to not carry on. And so on this one, I think we're going to address just a few of the main questions that have come up. The primary one being the eighth draft, or what I referred to as the ghost draft. What is the ghost draft? And I'm also going to talk a little about the tour that's coming. That was on everyone's mind, which was lovely to hear. And then the question of the hat. The hat always comes up. Why do I wear this hat? And I might as well answer right now. I don't really know. It's a practical hat, for me at least. I have, and I've always had fairly big ears. My dear daughter will know that her fate is similar to mine. And so, especially living in California, you want a little bit more shade. I could bring up the old saw about Einstein never having to make a decision about what to wear because he always wore the same thing. I don't know if that's true. But it's certainly easy to reach out and go, hey, this is the hat I'm going to wear. It's not a fancy hat. I got it at some kiosk and it just fits my head very well. That was very comfortable. And so maybe when I finally figure out why exactly I'm wearing it, if there's something more to it than that, then I'll stop wearing it. So right now it is one of the grand mysteries in my own life. But hats are certainly important, as you now know. We have a title for the book, Tom's Crossing. And as you've seen, the cover sports a hat. And certainly a lot went into that hat, a lot of fun as well. Began to wonder, well, what if we put this hat on it, non sum qualis eram hat? You know, that would be kind of funny if I was like that. And maybe there is an alternate version of the new book with this hat. I can imagine it floating that way, or you could imagine it even backwards, or what that would mean. But we certainly talked a lot, about different possibilities, and eventually what started it off was this one, which is a front pitch hat. And I have to say, this one does fit pretty well on me. I do like it. It's dark. I think I've done a couple of videos with this on it, and it does seem to stir something. Start to get that drawl. It starts coming in like that. But the shape of this hat wasn't exactly what we wanted, though the front pinch, for reasons that you may one day understand, could have been a very strong possibility for that cover. But instead, we wanted to find the right hat. And so one of the glories of living in Los Angeles is that I can reach out to people who are involved with costumes, who are involved with props, and who could steer me towards the hat that you now see on the cover, that is in fact a Stetson and does have exactly the silhouette that you would have seen being worn in the late 70s and early 80s. It's got the cattleman crown. And so I was able to find a wonderful store, and it was owned by the fellow who owned it decades ago. And so he and I got to having a great conversation about the hat. And so one of the joys of doing this kind of creative work is that it actually leads you out beyond the screen, beyond what you can find online. And you actually end up having wonderful conversations with people and learning details that you wouldn't have come across if you hadn't actually gotten out and about. And so, there's something a little haunting about this kind of hat, and suddenly maybe the gravel's right, and things can get maybe a little tricky. You can see it's kind of I don't know. It can kind of make me feel a little, I don't know, a little spooky, and we'll get to that in a bit. But not surprising to a lot of you, there was a lot of detail that went into just finding the right hat, the right silhouette, and setting up that cover to set up the adventure that awaits you all. And part of that adventure will include a tour. And right now, I think, and this is the good news, we're looking at tours because they are demanding. I think Pantheon and I have been discussing, and again, this is not set, but that's also good news. We're discussing possibly like 1 week, so 6 cities in a row, and then taking a month off. So the first tour would probably be in early November, right after the book is released on October 28th. And then the second tour would be the first week of December. Maybe there would be a break January, and then we do February and March. And if there was a real demand, we'd do another one in April. And so you can imagine some of the cities that we'll go to, but I want you out there to also think about possible places in your state. I think it's likely that we will go to Texas. I mean, I hope so. And Florida. I've never been to Maine. But if you have a favorite bookstore and you'd like to see me head your way, then now is the time to talk to that bookstore. Now think carefully about that bookstore. It's the publisher is going to want the bookstore pretty close to an airport, for example. So the idea is picking a place that you really think is right, that's within reach, and then getting them to reach out and start promoting the event, because that's how it works. And it's actually an extraordinary deal, and in some ways it doesn't make any sense because the publisher pays for everything. The publisher pays for travel, and all the bookstore has to do is basically, assure Pantheon that they will put on a good event, that they will publicize it, that they will make they will get people to come and whatnot, and then we'll have a good evening, and I'm looking forward to those evenings. So, what is the Ghost Draft? We head into the kind of masterclass part of this video, and I completely understand if after that bit of news you're out of here, because in some ways this really applies to people who are on that journey. I've talked about metaphors to use in your life to get you through those really difficult projects, and that's what this is now about. So the 7th draft was delivered in December, and where that draft went was to copy editors who would then go over every single sentence, every single word, and look out for a typo, an awry comma, inconsistencies with punctuation, verb agreement that didn't quite match what was intended. Every single thing. So you can imagine the project there. And I have to tell you, that was its own project. to go through what you now know is 1,232 pages, um, and and dedicate that kind of focus, for which I'm incredibly grateful. And we'll get to the painful part about that in a bit. And so that work proceeded late December. I hope they didn't do it in December. I think they started in January. And I got it 2 months later. So what was I doing in January and February? Well, the publisher, your publisher, if you're on this road and you have just submitted your book to the publisher and to copy editors, will tell you to do something else. But that's not what I did. And so this is the dangerous part of the journey, right? This is, to use a metaphor that doesn't apply to me at all, this is where I'm climbing that face at this point involved with my editor, my publisher, and I've got ropes and I got pitons and I'm all strapped into that rock. And then I decide to just forget about the ropes and the pitons and just start to free solo a section, because it's very difficult to see exactly what I'm doing. And I want to share what I'm doing, and I will through the technology that's available. But at the same time, it adds a sort of ghostly element to this process, because the copy edited version, which arrived the beginning of March, was on the 7th draft. But the changes that I've been applying from that copy edited version are on the 8th draft. Now, if you're talking about a small document, you can take Adobe Acrobat and you can actually compare those documents, and that is possible. But with 1,200 pages, there is an enormity of changes, and it presents an enormous amount of work for my publisher. So I have to not only apply these changes or address these queries, as we say, in the copy edited version of the 7th draft, I have to also alert my publisher where there are multiple other changes and why there's been some reflow and why the page number has shifted, at least within chapters and whatnot. I know it's all very technical and seems kind of I don't know, beyond the point. But the point is that that's what really writing is about. And let me tell you, when that copy edited version arrived, I mean, the document reflecting all the changes, and it comes in all the queries, all the questions about things that I was doing. It presented a huge task. Let's just say that. And perhaps this will be encouraging for some of you out there, because there were over 12,000 queries about Draft 7. Now, it's a beautiful, mesmerizing dance of commas and apostrophes and semicolons and hyphens and typos and some continuity questions, not many, but some that were very valuable. And you can imagine the work that's required, because just on a simple physical level, I have opened on one part of the screen this Adobe document with comments, and then I have what's now the 9th draft, because I'm applying these changes to the 9th draft, open. And so as I click to the PDF, I then have to examine the comment, examine the suggestion. Do I want to implement this comma? And when I go over, I have to awaken the Adobe InDesign application, which is what I'm using for Tom's Crossing, and either insert or delete that comma. And I go back over, and I have to then click on the comma, on the comment that I've accepted it, or I've flagged it for attention so the copy editor can then review it in the next pass. So all told, you have a potential of half a dozen clicks for each query. So we're talking about 60,000 clicks. Now, there's ways to reduce that, but at the same time, if you're being diligent and you're addressing each of those questions, you can't get too far ahead. Otherwise, you can start to forget, you can get sloppy, you think you've implemented the change, you haven't. And so we're heading towards 150 plus hours of concentrated attention on just these little differences, significant differences, but little. There is almost no opportunity for creative flight. If I am to linger too long on a sentence, I will fall grossly behind, and 150 hours could easily become 300 or 500 hours. And so I have to move with a pace. And yes, the metaphor of the butterfly came back again. And for those of you who didn't watch the last video, I'm not talking about a wonderful, gentle flapping of wings, but the near drowning motion of arms moving forward through the water as you attempt to propel yourself, the butterfly stroke across 200 yards. And you just have to do it over and over, even as exhaustion begins to hunt you. And I will say, again, I hope this is encouraging, as someone who's published, 10 books, it's also humbling to see the kind of errors. After 8 drafts, there are still errors. Now, some of these are not just errors, some of these are questions about whether this is really what I want to do or whatnot. But that some of them are just flat out mistakes. And I have to go through every single one. And so every single day is 8 to 10 hours hearing, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here. And I took this opportunity to show my daughter, who's starting to wrestle with the fact that she makes mistakes in the work that she does for school, and show her that even her father has to deal with a document with hundreds and thousands of little red marks saying what I have done incorrectly, and I have to address each one and fix them and understand why I made that mistake and move forward. So part of this process is also addressing these errors and slowly, with that fine-tooth comb, peeling them away. Now, I'm going to contradict myself, because there is actually a possibility for creative energies here. And I can't quite make the argument that it's on a quantum level, but it is on a, atomic particle level. Because what can we do with a comma, right? The comma can acquire a voice, right? It can have the intentionality of a longer pause, even though grammatically it might not be observed as correct. So one of the choices I decided was to go with the serial comma. And I had been on the fence when I was writing all the drafts, because I liked the airiness of it. But then I began, the importance of the voice took precedent. How does this begin to take its place when it's vocalized? And those commas became important guides for the reader, and especially any reader who wants to say it out loud. But as you've already found out now, Tom's Crossing involves 2 very important figures. And those are those horses. And so in the last hour, and I haven't completely finalized this, I've decided not to use the serial comma where it applies to those two horses, so that those horses will be further unified, that they will be less divided. And that's just one of hundreds of choices. And I have to ask, does it make a difference? I don't know. At a certain speed, the reader will be taken through those parts without ever, registering that comma. But the point is, the kind of work that I do moves from the big all the way down to these tiny, tiny decisions, Do I just put a period and then create a new sentence? Do I use a semicolon to keep these two sentences together? They're fairly long. But make sure that second part has its active and findable, observable verb. Or do I rely on the gerund, which is going to give it more flow and understand that the reader can, without actually consciously parsing the grammar, understand already the subject and the verb, and with the gerund just adding this extra bit of fluidity, I guess. So yes, I could go with a comma, but at the same time, if it's a longer composition, then maybe the semicolon is what will give that moment a tiny bit of breath, a kind of a foothold, a moment to kind of coagulate. That's a rough word. Coagulate the meaning there. Coagulate does evoke blood, doesn't it? And I suppose I should warn you that this is a book that is not void of bloodshed. Even though that there's an element there that we have to observe as bloodless, which maybe is a good segue to that ghost draft, because the ghost draft also has a purpose. As I was working on it in January and February, I did so with an important mandate in mind. My editor wants to send out a dozen copies to possible authors who will, in essence, read it and hopefully provide some words. And again, this I hope is encouragement for you, because perhaps you think that because I'm the author of House of Leaves and, Only Revolutions and The Familiar, and of course The 50-Year Sword, I start listing the books, and then I have to list them all because I love them. Yeah, The Whale Still Letter, and of course The Little Blue Kite. That I can just, magically, generate all sorts of words of praise, and that is not the case. I know, people send me, books that they want me to blurb, and I always receive them with an ache in my heart, because sometimes there's just not the time to get to those books. But I look at them and we try, to at least maybe do a post on them in social media. And if there ever is a post, by the way, it's public. So any words that accompany it, especially if it's explicit that it's from me and not from, say, Hazel, can be used. So something to bear in mind, because I realize that some of you writers are really working hard, and you want some of that. You want me to, or other authors to, provide words that will generate attention. And that's a curious element too, is I don't know how effective blurbs are in generating attention. I have done a few, and I don't really think I helped the books as much as I wanted to. I don't know if it made a difference. In some cases, I think it did make a difference, but it's tricky. So will be getting the copy of this Ghost Draft. And in fact, that is what arrived yesterday. It was very, very exciting. Well, yeah, I'm going to show it to you. Here it is. Here is, in fact, the Ghost Draft right now. I wanted a very simple paper, light brown. There's nothing on the spine, and there's nothing on the back. And yes, it's very heavy, and there is a lot of pages. And this is a big demand on anyone, no matter who wrote it. And so I will be sending this to about a dozen. And for those of you who are eyeing this, be aware that there are less than 24 copies of this. And mostly my publisher is sending them out, and they're sending some my way to personalize. But these are not available. And this draft does not reflect the already, let's say, 9,000 changes that I've made in the last month. And so it's a strange kind of thing. You know, there's an error that has to do with the spelling of Aries, for example, which has been corrected, but it's in here. And it kind of annoys me, to be honest. There's part of me that doesn't want to send this out because I know everything that's been fixed in it or bettered in it. But at the same time, you know, those receiving it will, you know, are professionals and understand how, you know, the polishing that's necessary and that will continue. So what's ahead for me is that I will soon receive all copies of this, whatever it is, a dozen, I think, and then those will be sent out. And if I'm lucky, one of them will have the fortitude to read a 1,200-page book and actually write something that the publisher will feel can help generate confidence among its sales team, sales representatives, and, you know, at various bookstores and book chains that might take an interest in reading something like this. But let's face it, it's a big, big book. And I think that's probably where this should end, because I will be finishing the 9th draft, so that's the implementation of all of the copy editor queries, along with other minor details that have to be addressed. And that will be turned in on April 15th. And then that is what will be used for the galleys. And the galleys will come out about a month later. And again, we will not be actually printing, you know, a large amount. But we do want to try to get them to some of you. And so I don't know what the publisher's doing. They're going to look at a lottery. They're going to do an application. Obviously, this is a sales tool. So if you happen to be someone who has, you know, a certain number of followers, you know, which I just have a hard time with that indice in many ways, because it's really about, if you have 5 followers and they're all great, that's what matters the most. But nonetheless, it is a process. It now involves my publisher, a big company. They've put in money to make these galleys, and we will try to get them out to you. Again, though, I will be then taking that galley, which will reflect the changes that I made in the Ghost Draft, what you've just seen in this one, as well as the changes that I've been doing for the 9th draft. And then I will get the last read through, the 10th draft. And I will be able to make final markings on that. And I will then be turning that back to my publisher on, I think, June 9th. And then that will be it. So I guess it was 10 drafts. It will be it. And then that will be turned into the book that will arrive in late October. October, right before Halloween. And as it begins to happen, like when I received this, the solidity was something that was extraordinary, it's exciting. It was real all of a sudden. Like even without those final polishes, there is now a book here. And I began to see with a sort of with a sort of vertigo where I'd been, the nearly 6 years that I'd put into this. And of course, the question is it worth it? And that's a tough one. What is worth, especially when it comes to writing, it comes to big, big projects? I mean, what do we do it for? And the great thing about writing is that you're paying attention to the world that you've created. And so you don't ask that question. But when something like this arrives, you then feel its dimensions. You carry it. You feel its weight. It's heavy. And you then begin to quantify it. And so, is it for the money? You have to talk about money. I mean, money is a conversation. It's a very important conversation, on a personal level, on a national level. If you're paired, you have to talk with one another about money. And so, if I sell 250,000 copies, that will be a success. That's considered a success. But if you roughly figure it's $1 a book I get, right? Well, that's $250,000. Spread that over 6 years of work, minus taxes, and you start to see that, well, it's not tech money. And if it doesn't sell much beyond that, as the years accumulate, it becomes worth less and less in that regard. Now, this is a sort of also a silly kind of digression, if you will, because you don't just do it for the money. Everyone who's creative, and if you're listening to this by this point, you are creative. You have been involved in a project that is putting it to you, that is taking it out of you, and you're here because you're, whether it's specifically to do with writing or some other artistic medium, or even artistic energies required to be great in all sorts of jobs, whether it's, it's corporate, whether it's in construction, whether it's in just the routine of retail. All of it has opportunities to be inventive and also to challenge you with exhaustion. That our purposes are not aligned with the economic indices that our society constantly emphasizes as important. So do I do it for rewards? Well, rewards are, to quote the novelist Steve Erickson, are capricious. They come down to a handful of people. Or are they going to want it? Are they going to have time to read it? Are they going to think that it merits any attention? Who's to say? So I had to ask myself, well, why have I written this book? Where does my journey lie? Where is my excitement? Where are my forever feelings? And I realized that it's about the experience that you're about to have. I can't tell you how excited I am for you. I mean, yes, it will come back to me, but in some ways, I'm experiencing waves of sadness because the journey that I've been on with Tom's Crossing is coming to an end. I have to say goodbye to it. And the only thing that fills me with joy is that you are going to be able to go on this journey. Now, I realize that you is huge, and yes, some people are not going to like it. Some people are, I can't read a 1,200-page book. There's all that, but that's not who I'm talking to now. I'm talking to that person who's going to get this, and they're going to go, wow, okay, I got this. And this is going to be with me for the weeks and months ahead. And I am going to get to go on this journey. And what's more, it's going to be my companion on my own journey. It's going to be there to accompany me as I face what's ahead. And so as you engage the great journey that takes place in this book, it will accompany you on the great journey that you're going through right now in your life, or the one that awaits you. And it will be a challenge, but it will ready you for the challenge that you will have to face on your own, beyond the perimeter of any page. And for that, and that experience, I'm terribly excited about, and I look forward to hearing from you, whether it's in the late months of this year or if it's years from now, because it will take a while to read, and it will be a very personal experience for you. And just know it was an incredibly personal experience for me, and despite its darkness, despite even its horrors, there is in there that story of, like, when it's hard to get up, you get up. It's hard to be a parent, you be a parent. It's hard to take that next step. Take that next step, and you can do it. That's enough for now. I look forward to speaking with you a bit more, and I look forward to seeing you in October, November, and early 2026. And feel free to post questions, desires in terms of where the tour wants to go. Be specific. If you want to name bookstores, that can be helpful, but it's better if you go to the bookstore, and those who host such events will know how to get in touch with Pantheon. And yeah, it's been great talking to you always. Bye.